All right, everyone, we're here today for the second lecture on plants. It's over structure and function. It's a little bit of a long one, but bear with me, we'll get through it together. As always, you have the option to just go through the slides on your own and not have to listen to my dull voice droning on and on. Your choice, whatever helps you the best. All right, so talking about structure and function of plants. So the first thing that we got to ask is how are we like plants? Or how are plants like us? So we are both alike in that we have same levels or similar levels of organization. If you remember back to last semester, we talked about how a group of cells working together forms a tissue, a group of tissues working together form organs, and that's how in us we have things like certain cells working together make smooth muscle tissue, and those muscle tissues working together might make up an organ like say your heart or your cardiovascular system eventually. Right, same thing here in plants. Right, they have types of cells that work together. Excuse me. Those cells, when they work together, become tissue, and the tissues in plants are ground tissue, vascular tissue, and dermal tissue. We'll get into those a little bit more later. And then those tissues working together form what can be called the organs of the plant. So we have the roots, the stems, and the leaves. Right. So first off, we're going to talk about the cells. We're going to focus on three types of cells that are found in plants. Now they have really weird names, so you're going to have to bear with me here. They are hard to read, hard to pronounce. If you pronounce them off, it's no big deal. No one's going to make fun of you. Right? They're just kind of a pain in the butt to pronounce. So I'll go through them. So first off, we have parenchyma. Now number one is pronounced parenchyma, and you have a picture of it there on the left side of your screen. So these cells are for storage and photosynthesis. They have very thin cell walls. Right? They just need to be able to be flexed and hold what it needs to hold. It's their storage cells. Think of it almost like trash bags. They have thin walls, but they're flexible. They can hold a lot in them. Number two, in the middle for those pictures, we have collenchyma. Collenchyma. These are used for structure and support. They have strong but flexible cell walls. Right? So they're strong, but they can still bend and move. That's what being flexible means, right? Up last, on the right, we have sclerenchyma. Sclerenchyma. Right? This makes tissues tough and strong, so they have very thick, rigid cell walls. Right? Thick and rigid. Rigid means it doesn't move, doesn't bend. It's rigid. Like a brick wall is rigid. Doesn't move, doesn't bend. It's just there. All right, so those are our types of cells. So when cells are working together, we know we call that tissue. So we're going to go over the three types of tissue that we find in plants. So number one is vascular tissue. Vascular tissue transports food and water throughout the plant. Right? Plants have vascular systems just the way humans do. Right? Our vascular system pumps our blood and everything that we need all throughout our body. The vascular system for the plants transports everything it needs all throughout their body. Right? Number two is dermal tissue. This is the outside layer of the plant, almost like its skin. This is the part that we see. We can see just looking at the plant. Right? It's the outermost layer. The third one is a little tricky. The name implies something that it really isn't. So the third one is ground tissue. This carries out the processes of life and photosynthesis and helps support the plant. So ground tissue makes it sound like these are the tissues that are found like underground, like in the roots. That is not the case. If you look at here, the picture on the right side of your screen, ground tissues are found all throughout the plant. In the roots, in the stems, in the leaves, everywhere. You read the little caption, it says the ground tissue system carries out photosynthesis, stores photosynthesis products, and helps support the plant. So even though it just says ground tissue, it's not just found just in the ground. All right, it's not just the roots, it's found throughout the plant, and it helps support the plant in its life. All right, so from tissues, we go to what could be called the organs of the plants. First one up is roots. We've all seen the roots of a plant. We've eaten them sometimes, right? So the first part of the root structure that we're going to talk about is the root cap. If you look in the picture on the right, it is that purple part down there at the bottom. Right? The root cap protects the root and absorbs water and minerals. Number 2, the hairs all over the root. If you ever pulled a weed out or a plant out of the ground and you see it has all these little hairs on it, that's to increase the surface area. So there's more surface area, which means it can absorb more water. And the third part is the pronounced apical meristem. Right? That's apical meristem. And if you look at the picture on the right, it's that little group of cells just behind the root cap. This is the group of cells that divide, so it's going through mitosis, and it increases the length of the root. So when the root needs to grow longer, right, these cells are the ones that are dividing to help it get longer. All right, from the roots, we are going to take a deeper look. All right, so this is actually an exploded view of what the roots might look like if we were to look under a microscope and had an exploded view. So we know that roots absorb water through the soil. So the way they're able to do that is through what's called root pressure. Right? This pressure allows the water to move from the soil into the root. And since we don't want that water moving back out, because if the water just flowed in and out of the root, then none of it will be able to get up to where it needs in the leaves and stems. So to prevent it from flowing back out, we have what's called a Casparian strip. And if you look at the picture, it's that little pink layer with the little purple endodermal cells on it. That is a Casparian strip. Prevents water backflow. So it stops water from flowing back out of the roots. So we can hold on to that water and send it upwards where it needs to go. All right, I think we're about halfway through. Bear with me. A couple more slides to go. All right, so roots. Many people don't know this, but roots can adapt to their environment depending on how they grow. So in dry climates, root systems can grow extremely long to get deep down underground to reach where they need to go. So if you look here in the picture, you can see and you can tell kind of which plants might grow in the driest environments because their roots are going to be longer and going deeper down. So you see like over here on the far left, and so the second from the left and the second from the right, if you look at the top part, the part that are above the soil, those plants aren't very big. But if you look at their root systems, they go way deep down. Because they got to go way deep down to get that water. All right, next slide is just another, it's a bisection of a root. You only have a couple labels on here. Right in the middle of that root, you can see that little tube system that's called the xylem. And right next to the xylem is called the phloem. We're going to get into those a little more in depth later on, but you should hopefully remember them from those videos you saw from the Amoeba Sisters video. They talked a little bit about them. So one important thing to note on this picture, if you look at the bottom rightmost square, what it's pointing at, that is pointing to the apical meristem. Right, that little area of cells that it's pointing to, that is the apical meristem. All right, moving on up to stems. So we're moving up from roots to stems. Right, so stems help transport stuff. Though it's a big part of the transport system. So here we're going to talk about that xylem and that phloem. All right, so xylem transports water and minerals up from the roots to the rest of the plant. So all that water and all that minerals that's getting absorbed in the roots, the xylem is taking it further up the plant to reach the stems and the leaves and everything that it needs, where it needs to go. Right. The other part is the phloem. If you remember the video, it said the phloem sounds like food. That's an easy way to remember what it transports. It's transporting water also, but sugar and nutrients. Those are the food. Right, down to the roots. So the sugar and nutrients, all that stuff getting made out in the leaves, it's being transported downwards to the roots so the roots can get those nutrients it needs to grow. So we got a little picture here. You can see the xylem is the stuff in blue. All right, it shows the water, so the xylem path going upwards, and then the phloem path is going downwards in green. Right. Now it's mixed all throughout the cell. It's not just as simple as there's xylem on one side and phloem on the other. But this is kind of a rough, to give you a rough idea of how it works. Alright, so parts of the stem, or actually how the stem is able to get everything to where it needs to go. So, as humans, we have hearts, and the hearts help to pump our fluid where it needs to go. Plants don't have hearts. I don't know if you ever stepped on a plant or opened a plant up or cut a plant up in the kitchen, but there's no plant hearts in there that you got to worry about taking out because they'd be squishy or anything like that. It'd be weird. There was plant hearts. So how does the water move up and down throughout the plant? Because we have gravity it's got to fight here. Water doesn't just move up on its own in solid form, right? So water is moving throughout the stems by what's called capillary action. Right. So water molecules are attracted to each other. That's science. That's chemistry. That you'll learn more about it in chemistry, but just because of the nature of water, the molecules are attracted to each other. This property is called cohesion. Right. If you ever heard something described, a group of people described as very cohesive, that means they stick together. Cohesion. So cohesion is attracted to each other. Right. The water is also attracted to the walls in the xylem. That is called adhesion. Have you ever heard anything called an adhesive? An adhesive makes things sticky, right? It sticks things to other things. I got an adhesive strip, put it on the wall, you stick stuff to the wall, right? Adhesion attracts things to others. So for the water, it is attracted to the walls and the xylem. That is called adhesion. So because of cohesion and adhesion, water is able to be moved up through the xylem. Right. So transpiration is what is called when the water moves up through the xylem and up through the stem and out through the leaves. Right. So if we have a little picture here, this might make it a little clearer. On the top right of your screen, we can see water going into the roots and flowing up through the stem. It's being pulled up by that capillary action, and then it's going into the leaves. Now, once in the leaves, the water starts to evaporate and go out. As it's leaving, it's pulling those water molecules that are behind it. They're being pulled forward to take its place, and everything's being pulled upwards. All right? It's all being pulled upwards, and that whole system of the water being pulled upwards and outwards and eventually evaporating, that's called transpiration. All right. So, some adaptations of stems. So, bark is an adaptation of a stem. When you go outside and you look at a tree and you see a tree trunk, that is just a big old stem. All right? And the bark is an adaptation that tree is made to help prevent the loss of water and also protect the plant. All right. You might have heard this before, but you can actually read things in tree rings. All right, if you were to take a sample, a core sample from a tree, or if you were to go look at a tree that's been chopped down, you can see rings in there. Right. So one light ring and one dark ring represent 1 year of growth. So the light ring is the inside of the wood of the tree, and the dark ring represent where it used to be bark. All right. So thick rings represent good weather or that was able to provide the tree with all the nutrients needed to grow a lot. Thin rings represent usually poor weather, so the tree wasn't able to get what it needed, so it didn't grow as much that year. You see here in the picture, it shows a rainy season, so it's a really thick ring. So there was a good year, it had a lot of rain, a lot of nutrients, everything it needed to grow. And then you can see above that, a dry season is very thin ring. And you can also see a scar from a forest fire in there. All this stuff stays with the tree, and you can tell this stuff by looking at its rings. So we can tell us a lot about what happened in the past, especially some of those really, really old trees, some of those ancient trees that are just huge. There's not a whole lot of them left, unfortunately, because people chop them down. But we can look at that and we can see what the environment was like way back in the past. All right. Here's some of that info put on a chart. It says, suppose a tree farmer has collected data about tree ring growth for many years. During that time, only one major drought has occurred. Based on the graph above, between which years did the drought most likely occur? So if you were to interpret this graph, on the left, you have the tree ring width in millimeters. So the higher up it goes, the wider it is. And then down at the bottom, you have the years. So a major drought is going to represent a poor year of growth, so you're going to look at the thinnest ring. So the thinnest ring is going to be right around 1980, only at only 0.2 millimeters. So that's most likely when that drought occurred. All right, moving on to leaves. So the primary function of leaves is photosynthesis. We got a picture up in the top left of a crosscut of a leaf. We got sunlight going in. All right, we got xylem and phloem in there. We got a whole lot of other cell types that you don't need to know right now. All right, and we got some stomas on the bottom, at least we'll go into. But we got that sunlight going in, and photosynthesis is taking place. So in the transport system, the leaves also play a role in there. Right? So transpiration happens in the leaves. We talked about transpiration a couple slides ago. That is, if we'll go back real quick, when water moves up the xylem stem and out the leaves. All right. So that is happening through the leaves. That loss of water is happening through the leaves. Right. So that loss of water is not just uncontrolled loss. Right. It's not just like water constantly evaporating. It's very controlled. Right. So the way that plants control that loss is a couple of things they've adapted and they've developed over those millennia. So the top of the leaves, there's what's called a cuticle. It's a waxy layer that prevents water loss. It's just a little waterproof layer. You look at this leaf that it shows in the picture, you can see the water beating up because it's not able to get through the leaf. All right, it's waterproof. Now on the underside of those leaves are what's called stomata. Those little circles, they're little holes in the bottom of the leaves that help regulate water loss. Right. There's little guard cells around them that can open and close them. All right, so it says here, guard cells regulate gas and water vapor. They tell stomata when to open or close. So a group of those holes is called stomata. A single one is called a stoma. Little fun fact, whenever someone has throat cancer and they have to get one of those holes put in their neck, that is also called a stoma. Super gross, huh? Yeah, it is. All right, so open stoma let water and CO2 in and out of the cell. All right, and then closed, it stops that water from leaving. So that's how it maintains homeostasis, by controlling how much water goes into and out of the cell as well as air. All right, almost done, guys. Keep it with me. All right, we talked about transpiration already. We can see the water being absorbed by the roots and the root hairs, going up through the plant into the leaves, and then the water is lost through evaporation, otherwise known as transpiration. And that transpiration is regulated by the stomata. All right, so some adaptations of leaves, how they have adapted to their environment. So once again, like we said, they've developed a thick cuticle to be waterproof. Right? They've developed the ability to stay open or closed throughout the day to regulate that, so they can regulate how much water they are losing. A lot of them have developed reduced surface area, so there'll be smaller leaves depending on the environment, so there's less loss. You don't see big old broad leaves out in the desert because there would be too much water loss. All right. It actually shows a picture of a cactus up at the top left. The needles are modified leaves. They're very thin, and they don't have a lot of surface area, so there's not a lot of water being lost through the surface of the leaves. Right. They've also developed behaviors such as wilting. So everybody looks at a plant that's wilting and said, oh, that thing's dying. Well, it's lost a lot of water, and because of all that water loss, the cells begin to bend inward. But wilting actually helps to conserve water. So the stomata close because everything's bent inwards, and it actually helps to conserve water. It's like a last ditch effort to kind of hold on to as much water as it can. All right, that is it for this lecture. I know it was long, but you made it through. Good job. So go now and practice your vocabulary on quizzes. And once you're done with that, then you're good for this part of the lecture. Y'all have a great day. Bye.